In this video, we're going to talk about DDT. So DDT was a chemical that was introduced in the early 40s. It was invented in 1939. It was released into the environment, and it was originally supposed to be a pesticide that was going to be used to control mosquitoes. And so at the time, it looked really as a promising pesticide because it really had no effect on any type of organism except for mosquitoes. So it was touted as like, the best thing to come along since sliced bread. As you can see over here on the right-hand side, they had ads for it. DDT is good for me. But what we found out from DDT is that shortly after, about 10 years after it started to be used, we started seeing sharp declines in many different organisms, mostly in dead birds. And the reason that the birds were dying was because the DDT, or what they found out was that the DDT interacts with their body and prevents a protein in the formation of the hardening of eggshells. So what was occurring was the birds were laying eggs. They were fertilized eggs with chicks inside of them that were starting to develop. So the birds would sit on top of them to keep them warm, and because the shells were so flimsy, they were actually crushing their offspring, and they were killing them. So the population of birds started to decline very quickly because the eggs were not able to be formed properly. So one of the things about DDT is that it is a persistent chemical. It is what's known as a bioaccumulating or a biomagnification chemical. And when we talk about biomagnification, that's what we did in class with the beans. And in biomagnification, what happens is as you go up the food chain, the pollutant or the toxin stays within the fatty tissue of the organism. So therefore, when the predator eats the prey, that ppm is now transferred to that predator. And it will continue to work its way up through the food chain until it gets to the largest organisms at the top. So what you see here in the chart is that as the pollutant goes up, the concentration of it would also increase. This is why birds were one of the ones that were most affected by it, because they were eating a lot of aquatic organisms. The DDT that was being sprayed fell into our waterways, and it dissolved into our waterways, and it was being picked up by aquatic organisms. And it was being bioaccumulated or biomagnified throughout the ecosystem. So eventually the birds were getting this high concentration of DDT. And this was causing the higher concentration was having a much higher effect on their body. So the response was much higher. Now this graph is a little busy, but it does show that DDT is a persistent chemical. So what we're looking at here, if you look at the black dotted line, the black dotted line shows the DDT and then shows the DDT exposure. At this point, 1954 is when it was banned. And so the exposure dropped. However, the one line I do want to point out is this faded black line in the back here. And this faded black line shows that you could find DDT in the material of the body fat of organisms. And you can see that it stays within the organisms at a pretty high amount or a pretty high occurrence for quite some time, even after DDT has already been decreased and the use of it has already been dropped. So it shows that it's a persistent chemical within the environment. So what does this mean for humans? Well, DDT is soluble in lipids and oils. So one of the things is that once it's inside the fatty tissue of the organism, it's going to stay there inside that fatty tissue. And what happens is when that fatty tissue breaks down, so if you're doing, you're going on a diet, you're working out a lot, you start breaking down a lot of that fatty tissue, the chemical then is released directly into the bloodstream. So for humans, when DDT is released into the bloodstream, it attacks the liver and the nervous system. So we usually get this through some type of ingestion. So what we do is when we're eating our organisms or eating fish, this is how the DDT starts to bioaccumulate inside of our body. One of the other alarming effects of DDT is that it's been shown to cause cancer in some lab animals. So that could be a red flag for humans later on in life. So you can see over here, you can see it on the terrestrial sequence, you got your DDT spray, goes to our herbivores, comes out through their milk and their meat because they are fatty products, and that's the way it gets to us. Or if we go through the aquatic sequence, goes through the algae, herbivores, fish, secondary carnivores, third carnivores, and then eventually to us. So again, it's bioaccumulating in that ecosystem, and ultimately we're at the top of that ecosystem, so we're most susceptible to it.